Picture this: a garden so perfect it could have been painted. Hedges clipped to exact symmetry, roses blooming in colors that seem unreal, and a lawn trimmed so close it looks like velvet spread across the earth. This was not just a garden. It was a stage designed to convince the world that behind these white walls, life itself was flawless. But on this particular afternoon, the illusion broke. Because in the center of that perfect stage, beneath the gaze of marble statues and gilded balconies, a woman knelt on the ground. Not in prayer, not in gratitude, but in hunger. Her hands shook as she clawed the grass from the soil, shoving it into her mouth as tears streaked her cheeks. She gagged, sobbed, and tried again, her body too weak to stand, her dignity shattered in the silence of an empty garden. And in that moment, perfection revealed its price. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like madness. A maid losing her mind under the strain of labor. A servant breaking down in the shadows of her employer's empire. But the truth? The truth was not madness. It was obedience. This woman wasn't broken by insanity. She was broken by a rule. A rule so cruel, it was never written on paper, never spoken outside the house. And yet, it governed every moment of her life. A rule that would starve her to the point of chewing grass, even as banquets rotted in the trash. This story begins in one of the grandest homes in the country, the residence of a woman whose name alone commanded respect in boardrooms and headlines. A billionaire whose fortune stretched across industries, whose wealth insulated her from the struggles of ordinary people. To the world, she was an icon of success, a woman who had everything. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that inside her very own house, her power had been twisted into cruelty. The people who served her, polished her floors, ironed her suits, tended to her every demand. They lived under a silent rule. A rule that stripped them not only of freedom, but of basic humanity. And on that afternoon, in the garden she thought reflected perfection, that rule came to life in the most humiliating way possible. When the billionaire first saw her maid on her knees in the grass, she froze. Shock, confusion, anger, they all collided at once. She demanded answers. She wanted to know why. But what she would discover next wasn't just an answer. It was a revelation so dark, so crushing, that it would bring the billionaire herself to tears. Because this wasn't about disobedience. It wasn't about laziness. It wasn't even about madness. It was about survival. And survival, in this house, came at a cost too devastating to imagine. How far would you go to keep your family alive? Stay with me, because this story reveals more than cruelty. It reveals the kind of sacrifice no one should ever have to make. And once you hear it, you will never look at power, wealth, or loyalty the same way again. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd absolutely love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand what happened in this garden, to truly grasp why a woman of loyalty and silence was found on the ground, eating grass like an animal, we have to step back. Because this is not just a story about hunger. It's not just about a moment of weakness. It is about power. The kind of power that dazzles from the outside, but corrodes the lives of those trapped inside. Behind these doors lived one of the wealthiest women in the country, a self-made billionaire, admired, respected, a figure people pointed to as proof that success could be built from grit and discipline. To her colleagues, she was a titan. To her rivals, a threat. To the public, an icon. She was the kind of woman newspapers photographed when she arrived at charity galas. The kind whose name on a contract could move millions. And yet, inside her very own home, a rule was at work. A rule she did not create, but one that would stain everything she thought she knew about herself. Her name was Amara. To most, she was invisible. The one who tidied the halls before dawn. The one who slipped quietly past guests, collecting empty glasses and forgotten coats. She never complained, never spoke out of turn. She was the servant everyone thought they wanted. Silent, efficient, loyal. But behind her lowered eyes and trembling hands, Amara carried a secret. Every month, her wages left her hands before she even touched them. They traveled across oceans, across borders, to a child whose survival depended on them. Her son, sick, fragile, waiting on medicine that cost more than she could afford. So Amara made sacrifices. She skipped meals. She worked through fevers. She told herself hunger was temporary, but her son's life was not. And she obeyed the rules of the mansion, even when those rules starved her to the bone. Because in this house, food was plenty, but food was not hers. The staff knew it. They whispered it. They obeyed it. The unspoken law of the Whitmore mansion: servants do not eat what belongs to the family. Not a crumb, not a sip, not even the leftovers tossed into the trash. It was a law enforced with cold precision. And it is this law, this cruel rule, that would one day drive Amara to her knees in the garden, chewing the very grass she had once been ordered to cut. So we are left with questions. Why was she eating grass? Who created and enforced this rule that kept her starving while wealth sat rotting in silver bowls only feet away? And when the billionaire herself, the woman who commanded empires, finally witnessed this humiliation with her own eyes, what would she do? Ignore it? Condone it? Or break beneath the truth of her own household? These are the questions that cut to the heart of this story. Questions that force us to look at the distance between power and compassion, between silence and survival. Stay with me, because the answers are coming. But with every answer will come another question. And when the truth finally arrives, it will not only shake this house, it may change how you see justice itself. From the outside, the mansion was a fortress of wealth, a place people dreamed of entering, even just once. The marble floors polished daily until they reflected chandeliers like mirrors. The dining hall lined with long tables, enough to seat 50, though rarely used by more than a family of 3. Even the silence of the house seemed to whisper of power. But within this palace, there lived 2 worlds. The first belonged to the family. Rooms scented with imported flowers, closets bursting with gowns worn once and discarded, kitchens that produced banquets at the snap of a finger. The second world was hidden in the shadows. A world of servants who rose before dawn, their bodies already aching by noon. A world where hands cracked from bleach, where knees bruised from endless scrubbing, where hunger gnawed quietly while trays of untouched food were scraped into bins. And Amara belonged to this second world. She wasn't always a maid. Once, she had been a mother in a small town, holding her son close against the night air, whispering promises of a better future. But when sickness took root in his fragile body, and medicine became a cost she could never pay, Amara made a choice. She left her son behind and came here, to this house of perfection, to scrub, to polish, to bend under the weight of another woman's world. Also that her wages could travel home. Every month, every dollar, every coin sent across oceans. Not for herself, for him. And so, her sacrifice was invisible to those she served. They saw a uniform. They saw bowed shoulders, quiet yes ma'ams. They never saw the hunger she carried inside. They never noticed how her stomach twisted when the smell of roasted meat drifted through the halls, or how she turned her head away when platters of fruit were tossed out, uneaten. The rules of this house were never written down. They were never printed on contracts or pinned to walls, but every servant knew them. They learned through whispers, through sideways glances, through punishment disguised as order. Do not sit where the family sits. Do not eat what the family eats. Do not speak unless spoken to. And above all, never touch their food. It was a rule carried like a shadow, enforced not with papers or guards, but with something far sharper: fear. Whispers spread among the staff, stories of workers dismissed without warning, of accusations whispered into the billionaire's ear, stories of mouths that had dared to taste bread meant for the family, punished with unemployment and disgrace. And so they obeyed. Even as their stomachs growled, even as waste piled high, even as the scent of food lingered like temptation in every hallway, they obeyed. For Amara, silence was safer than truth. She endured. She swallowed her pain. Because her son's medicine mattered more than her dignity. And every day she told herself, just one more week, just one more shift, just one more paycheck. But hunger is not patient. Hunger waits for no one. And in time, silence breaks. But the rule that governed this house wasn't written anywhere. It was spoken, softly, cruelly, and enforced with fear. And it was only a matter of time before that rule drove Amara to her knees and forced the billionaire to face a truth she could no longer ignore. For days, Amara had been running on nothing but silence. Her stomach empty, her body weak. Her eyes grew heavier with each passing hour, but still she worked. The mansion demanded it. Floors needed scrubbing, beds needed turning, curtains needed dusting, and so she obeyed. But the rule of this house was clear. The food that filled the air with warmth and spice was not hers. Not the scraps, not the crumbs, not even the bones tossed aside. So she starved. Long days turned into longer nights. The weight of fatigue pressed down on her shoulders. Her head spun when she stood too quickly. Her hands trembled as she folded freshly pressed suits. And yet, no one noticed. To the family, the house ran as smoothly as ever. The clothes were always crisp, the marble always shining, the garden always trimmed. They did not see the price of perfection. They did not see the maid whose strength was being eaten away, day, by hunger. She had not eaten properly in 2 days. The air felt heavy in her lungs. Her heartbeat thudded like a drum in her ears. Her son's face lingered in her mind. The reason she endured, the reason she stayed silent. But even a mother's love cannot fill an empty stomach. Even sacrifice has limits. And then it happened. The breaking point. She whispered to herself, over and over, I can't. I can't anymore. And then, driven by a desperation no human being should ever know, she did the unthinkable. She pulled a handful of grass from the ground and pushed it into her mouth. It was humiliation. It was pain. It was survival. And it was in this moment that she was seen. The billionaire had come into her garden that afternoon expecting beauty, order, silence. What she found instead was her maid on her knees, eating grass like an animal. The garden, once perfect, now became a stage for horror. The woman who commanded empires, who could silence a boardroom with a single glance, stood frozen. Her maid, loyal, quiet, invisible, was breaking before her eyes. Her heart pounded. Her throat tightened. She demanded answers. But when the billionaire demanded answers, the truth would nearly destroy her. For a long moment, no one moved. The birds had gone quiet. Even the fountain at the edge of the garden seemed to hush its waters. The billionaire's mind raced. How could this be real? How could a woman who had worked under her roof for years, a woman who had never complained, never raised her voice, never demanded more, be here, on her knees, reduced to chewing grass like an animal? Her heart pounded in her ears. Her throat went dry. And then, finally, words broke from her lips. Her voice cracked between fury and fear. She demanded answers. She wanted an explanation that made sense. She wanted to believe this was anything other than what it looked like. But the only answer she received was silence. Amara trembled. The truth burned inside her, but fear sealed her lips. Because she knew, in this house, words were dangerous. Words could cost her everything. She remembered the warning whispered to her in the kitchen when she first arrived. A rule that needed no contract, no signature, no piece of paper. If you speak, you're finished. If you complain, you're gone. And if she lost this job, her son's medicine would stop. His chances of survival would vanish. So she bowed her head deeper into the dirt, tears dripping onto the grass she had just tried to swallow. The billionaire steps closer, her polished shoes stopping just inches from Amara's knees. She leans down, her voice harsher now. Look at me. Look at me, Amara. Tell me what this is. Amara shakes her head, sobbing silently, whispering only, Please, ma'am. Please, don't ask me. The billionaire's confusion twisted into rage. Not rage at her maid, but rage at the silence itself. How could this woman remain quiet when her dignity was being torn apart before her eyes? How could she refuse to speak when the billionaire demanded truth? And then, the silence was broken. Not by Amara, but by another voice. Because she's a servant, and servants don't eat our food. That is the rule. The sound seemed to echo through the garden. Her chest rose sharply as the words cut through her like glass. The billionaire's world cracked in that instant. The rule, the unspoken law that had haunted the servants, that had driven Amara to her knees, was spoken aloud. Calm, casual, cruel. And it came from the lips of the woman she had shared her life with. The mother takes another slow sip of her coffee, his eyes never leaving the billionaire's face. She steps closer, dismissive, as though explaining something obvious. Don't look at me like that, she said. I told her from the beginning. Staff are not allowed to touch our food. Not leftovers. Not scraps. They are here to serve, not to feed themselves like parasites. The billionaire's face drained of color. Her own mother, the woman she trusted, the woman she believed kept order in her absence, had built that order on cruelty, on starvation, on silence. She could hardly breathe. Her voice cracked as she forced the words out. You mean to tell me that under my roof, while food was being thrown away by the pound, you forbid them to eat? You watch them starve. The mother rolled her eyes, her tone sharp with irritation. Don't be dramatic. They're paid wages. If they're too stupid to bring their own bread, that's their problem. This house has standards. The billionaire's face twists, shock, anger, heartbreak, all colliding. Her fists shake. Her chest heaves. Her eyes glisten with the first trace of tears. Standards. That's what she called it. Standards that starved the very people who kept this house alive. Standards that forced Amara to her knees in the dirt. Standards that turned silence into survival. And now, in the heart of her perfect garden, the billionaire stood face to face with the truth of her own home. The mother smirks faintly, sipping her coffee again. She whispers, almost to herself, I don't even recognize you. The mother narrows her eyes, stepping closer. This is my household too. I kept order. Don't raise your voice at me in front of the help. The billionaire's body shook with fury. Her empire, her wealth, her power. None of it mattered now. What shattered her was the sight of her maid reduced to tears in the dirt, while her mother sipped coffee and called it standards. If you're still here, type the word together in the comments. Let's see who's really with us to this point. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because the truth that would follow, the truth Amara could no longer keep hidden, would nearly destroy them all. For a long moment, the silence weighed heavier than words. The billionaire's fury burned in her chest. Her mother's cold defiance hung in the air. And Amara bowed lower, her body curled inward like a child, caught between the storm above her head. But silence can only hold for so long. And when it broke, it shattered everything. The billionaire steps forward, crouching to meet Amara's lowered face. Her voice, no longer sharp but trembling, breaks through the tension. Why didn't you tell me? It was not a demand now. It was a plea. Her voice shook with something rare, something fragile. Desperation. Amara shakes her head violently, choking on her sobs. Her voice cracks through the tears. Because she said if I complained, I'd be thrown out. The billionaire blinks, stunned. Amara gasps for breath, words spilling out now like a dam breaking. I send all my wages home. My son is sick. He needs medicine. If I lose this job, he won't survive. Her face crumples completely. Her body trembles as she cries into her hands. The garden, so perfectly kept, now holds the sound of human heartbreak. And there it was. The truth. Not madness. Not weakness. Not laziness. But survival. This woman had been starving herself to keep her child alive, sacrificing her own body so her son could breathe another day. And all the while, food was being thrown into trash bins only feet away. Waste. While a mother starved in silence. The billionaire staggers back a step. Her eyes blur. Her throat closes. She looks from her maid, sobbing, broken, trembling, to her mother, who stands unmoved, sipping her coffee as though none of it mattered. The billionaire's voice trembles, rising with fury. Do you hear that? Do you hear what you've done? She has been starving under our roof, while you tossed food away like garbage. The mother's expression did not shift. Her jaw tightened, but her eyes stayed cold. Don't turn this into a melodrama, she hissed. She's just a maid. They come and go. Don't act like she matters more than she does. The billionaire's face twists, her lips quivering, tears now brimming in her eyes. She steps toward her mom, her fingers shaking in the air. Don't you dare, she roared. Don't you dare say another word. Not one more. I don't even recognize the woman standing in front of me. Heartless, cruel, inhuman. The words ripped through the garden like thunder. For the first time in years, the billionaire saw her mother not as a bloodline, but as a stranger capable of a cruelty she could not forgive. And standing beside them, Amara wept harder, her small body convulsing with the release of years of silence and fear. The billionaire falls to her knees beside Amara, her hand hovering near her shoulder, unsure, ashamed. Her voice softens to a whisper, breaking. Forgive me. Forgive me for not seeing, for not knowing, for letting this happen under my roof. Amara shakes her head, sobbing into her apron. The billionaire presses her lips together, fighting back her own tears. Her empire, her millions, her reputation. All of it meant nothing in this moment. Because she had failed in the most basic way. She had not seen the suffering happening right in front of her. She had lost boardroom battles. She had faced rivals. She had endured scandals. None of it broke her. But this broke her. The sight of a loyal maid forced to chew grass while food was thrown into the garbage shattered the billionaire in a way no market crash or public attack ever could. But even then, the worst was still yet to come. For the first time, the billionaire did not feel powerful. She did not feel admired. She did not feel respected. She felt ashamed. Ashamed that her wealth, her influence, her empire had failed to protect the very people who kept it alive. And so, through broken sobs, she made a vow. The billionaire's voice trembles but grows louder, steadier, filling the garden like a storm. This ends today. Do you hear me? This ends now. You will never go hungry again. Not in my house. Not while I have breath in my body. In that garden, something broke. And something began. The mother turned away, her face hardened, her eyes narrowing with disdain. She stepped back into the mansion, sliding the glass door shut behind her with a sharp click, leaving the billionaire and her maid in the grass, clutching each other, their tears mixing with the dirt. What good is power if it blinds you to the suffering at your feet? What good is wealth if it demands dignity as its price? And what becomes of a home when silence replaces compassion? The billionaire's perspective was shattered. Her empire meant nothing if cruelty lived under her roof. She had spent her life chasing respect. But in that moment, respect meant nothing. What mattered now was justice. And justice, in this house, had only just begun. But was justice truly served? Or was this only the beginning of another reckoning? And so it ended here. Not in a boardroom, not in a courtroom, but in a garden where perfection cracked wide open. A billionaire brought to her knees. A maid whose silence finally broke. A household built on control, exposed for its cruelty. Ask yourself, what would you have done if you were Amara? Would you have dared to speak, knowing a single word could cost you the job your child's life depended on? Would you have risked it all for dignity, or swallowed your pain for survival? Should the billionaire, with her empire, her eyes on every detail, her life built on order, have seen the truth sooner? Should she have noticed the signs? The fatigue? The trembling hands? The silent cries hidden in plain sight? Or do even the most powerful among us live blind until reality forces us to see? Every month, every paycheck, every coin sent home to a sick child. And here, in this mansion of plenty, she starved. So what does this say, not just about one house, one rule, one woman, but about us? About the world we live in? How many lives go unseen? How many sacrifices go unnoticed? And how many people are still eating grass in silence, just to survive? And finally, the question that lingers for us all, what would you have done if this had happened in your home? Tell me, what's your take on this? Comment below. I'm reading every one of them. Because your voice matters here. Silence protected cruelty in this house. Don't let silence win again. Speak. If this story touched you, if it shook something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit like. Share it with someone who believes compassion should never be optional. And if you want more powerful stories like this, check out the video on your screen next. It will remind you, once again, that the most shocking truths are not in the headlines, but hidden in plain sight. Because sometimes, the real reckoning doesn't happen in court. It happens in silence. In gardens. In homes that look perfect from the outside, but are crumbling within.